Hello, today is Friday, May 15th. Welcome to episode 596 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vinia, and I'm joined today by my fellow Senior Fellows, Amy Mitchell, Matt Hayden, and John Lipsy. Y'all, this episode is dedicated to all of my fellow classics nerds out there. For today, we're going to unpack the political theory known as the Thucydides Trap and why Chinese President Xi Jinping referenced it in his meeting with President Trump this week. For those listeners who have not had the great fortune of reading the history of the Peloponnesian War, the Thucydides Trap is when a rising power threatens to displace an established power, and then conflict is likely to be the end result. In the case of Thucydides, those powers were Athens and Sparta. Today, it's China and the United States. During his meeting with President Trump, Xi made the reference with respect to China's claim over Taiwan, and one that made it into their meeting readout, whereas the United States' readout of the meeting did not include any reference to Taiwan. However, in a Truth Social post early this morning, President Trump recalled Xi's Thucydides Trap reference and recalled that the United States was a declining power 2 years ago during the Biden administration, but was not under his watch. So let's unpack this. John, over to you first. How do you read this reference? Is the United States in decline, and is China going to sort of rise, and are we likely to see conflict here? How do you see this playing out?
Well, Chinese leadership the party is fully persuaded of the decline of the West and the rise of the East, meaning the decline of the U.S. and the rise of China. And that's just a foundational precept. And so I don't think that's new. I think I take the point that she's speaking about that reference in the neighborhood of Taiwan brings it a little more to focus and raises the question of is he trying to send a new message, a more immediate, more concrete message about what his plans are with regard to Taiwan. I can't read the tea leaves necessarily on that with great clarity. I think on the overall trip, I think both sides with their respective statements were sort of telling on themselves. The president focused on the big economic deals, which he hoped to achieve, and President Xi focused on this, the goal of the agreement, as he put it, for both sides to work toward a constructive relationship of strategic stability. And so stability in the relationship, stability in the environment, an end to the constant ratchet of pressure for the United States is certainly what China is looking to get out of the relationship. I think President Trump can point to a couple wins in from the trip, notably with regard to Iran. I think what the president was able to put out in his statement that China agreed to on the strait the strait needs to be open, that there should be no tolls, that China is going to purchase oil from the United States, and that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. That is all, I think, to the positive for President Trump coming out of the trip. It already appears to have caused some consternation with the Iranians, which is always a good thing. But also, it's notable that he was able to get that kind of alignment, notwithstanding having just sanctioned two of China's largest petrochemical manufacturers for using Iranian oil right in the lead up to the visit. So I think that was notable and useful. I think one other, positive development from the Trump administration's perspective is there does seem to be some momentum building toward this board of trade and board of investment that I anticipate may be more likely to come to fruition around the September visit when President Xi comes to the United States. But to the extent that that does come together, I think that that is actually a pretty significant concession by the Chinese to a new a new trade relationship with the United States, one that is going to come with the most significant tariffs in the world, one that's going to come with significant export controls, one that's going to come with significant investment restrictions, and where China up to this point has largely pointed to the U.S. obligations and the goal of sticking to the World Trade Organization, international trade rules, that they seem to have conceded that that is no longer a viable path. And so I think both of those points are caught, as well as what sounds like some purchase agreements and the like, are all things that I think the president will be happy to have walked away with.
Okay. All right, Amy, over to you. Is the United States Sparta?
Yes.
Yeah, because Sparta won, right?
No, sorry. Sorry. We are currently Athens. I do not know I know the Sparta side, not as well. But anyway, I disagree with John. This is a fault line. I think, the Chinese rely heavily on symbolism, especially during visits such as this. Having the president feted in Tiananmen Square 2 weeks before the anniversary of Tiananmen was intentional. It was embarrassing to have the president talk about children waving flowers, and he's never seen such beautiful children before in his life. I think, to John's point, where I would disagree is Xi and China and their state media have put out nothing that confirms what the president has dictated as wins on this. It has actually been their silence, to me, speaks volumes in how China operates. In terms of trade, China does what it wants, regardless of international norms and rules. So I don't see anything coming out of this for the Trump administration other than China sees the U.S. now as a transactional partner, one that they will be able to manipulate in the future. And we don't know what was said behind closed doors or what the president agreed to with regards to Taiwan. This has been a 180 from the first administration, which saw a very hawkish position on China, to one of being conciliatory versus anything else. So this was losing.
So, Amy, I will grant you some of the propaganda victories that China may have had. I don't agree that this is a less hawkish on China administration to this point than the first administration. First of all, President Trump has been the most hawkish president from an economic standpoint towards China in history. And you put his two administrations together, he of course kicked off the sort of entity-less ratchet in his first term, as you point out. This term, he's now gone after on the trade side. We have, China's auto industry is sort of taking over the world, and they're fully banned and prohibited from the United States. So there have been, I think, a series of dramatic efforts that have taken. He pushed it to the limit, and got the retaliation on rare earths.
But he backs down, and he gives them a win every time. That is the difference between the first administration and the second. We held strong in the first administration consistently. In this one, we have conceded to China, and the more we concede to China, the more China will take advantage and push the envelope. So,
yeah, I would just say that China's facing, from the United States, it's the highest tariffs, the most significant export controls, most significant,
which have been ruled illegal. So, I mean, they still control rare earths. At the end of the day, we have not solved the underlying problems.
That we agree on.
Okay, I'm going to bring Matt Hayden in here. Matt, you have rightly noted, earlier this week that the trip can be mostly focused on trade, and frankly, like Trump brought in like some pretty heavy hitters from the business community. What's your take on this? How do you think the trip shaped up in terms of the economic results?
So for a trade trip, it was pretty heavy on trade topics, and we got a lot of good trade feedback. The challenge with trying to make it a national security trip or an overall diplomatic engagement is it didn't use national security tools or diplomatic tools traditionally. So we had to look at this in the lens in which the administration made it, which was we're going to go over and sell beans, beef, and Boeings, and we're going to bring our favorite wise guys with us. We're going to sit at a table and talk about increasing market presence in Chinese markets, and we're going to talk about increasing U.S. partnerships when it comes to supply chains that we want to make sure aren't threatened. That was the topics. That was what they hit, and behind the scenes or on the margins, as our security colleagues love to say, is that's where a lot of those other conversations were held. And so we did have the Secretary of State working those conversations behind a lot of those pomp and circumstance. And so there was a lot of conversations that we hope we'll find out some inroads later. But right now we just haven't gotten a direct readout on the behind the scenes. But I still have seen this president take a lot of these national security concerns and make them strengthened through economic ties. And so to the extent that we start to become a major oil vendor to China, to the extent that they become in any way more dependent on United States exports, that's a lever of whole of government that relies on national security to have another shot at an apple that pure national security, to Amy's point, has not worked in the past. So if you're going to have an agreement on national security, they'll say one thing and do another. So you needed to have something in addition to the enforcement tools that we currently put out there. And economic trade seems to be the lever this president likes the most.
Can I
All right.
something there really
Yeah,
quick?
go ahead, Amy.
A question to Matt on that, and to John. President talked about Iran. China has not. Do we really think, was it the president just saying that China agreed to this, or did China actually agree to help and or buy more oil from the United States? China has been mum on that point.
Yeah, I mean, my take on these sorts of things is there's an aspect of benign or not benign. There's an aspect of ambiguity that each side can sort of hang their hat on, right, on these sorts of things, right? So when we agree around that the Strait of Hormuz should be open, well, that's useful to the U.S. because of course, Iran is from our perspective, the primary actor in closing the strait. China can kind of hang its hat on the other side and emphasize U.S. actions in starting the conflict, and that we're to blame in the first instance. However, there's also just that agreement and getting the president being so. My view is the president being able to say it publicly as part of his official statement coming out of the meeting is that these were things that were discussed and likely agreed to in private. It's not surprising to me that President Xi is not going to come out and say these things because they would be, there would be more appearance of him taking the side of the U.S. in the conflict against Iran, and that's not something he's interested in doing. So I think that there's value in these agreements. There's value in the president being able to say it. It creates a wedge and difficulty in the relationship between China and Iran. I think that they are principles that China generally agrees with, but it's not resolving the dispute over Iran. China will continue to support Iran in certain ways, but the Iran issue is a mess for China as well, with its presence throughout the region and other countries in the region that it's got issues sort of untangling itself from, as well as now we're sanctioning their largest petrochemical companies, and they are struggling to react and respond to that. So I think there's real and substance, but also, I don't want to take that point too far.
All right, y'all. So President Trump and Xi are going to be meeting a number of times this year. This is obviously a first meeting, but a very important one at that. So I think we will see how this plays out and the meetings to follow. That is a wrap. Thanks to Grace Trice, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Monday, May 18th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.